So no, it's still morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Jer, thank you. Joyce, Miss Pamela Neal, Nichelle, everybody, thank you very much for joining. That's who I can see on my screen. Today, we're going to talk about educational issues. And as far as the NAACP is concerned, you know, from the national level, the NAACP believes in, you know, equitable educational opportunities for everyone. And, you know, promoting education for everyone is part of one of the pillars of the National Council for the Advancement, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which means everybody has a color, everybody is included. And the NAACP believes in making sure that quality education is available for everyone. We do have the Maricopa County branch in NAACP has a pretty active education committee. We have a program called Back to School, Stay in School. The Back to School, Stay in School provides scholarships and workshops, financial literacy, and other kind of workshops for high school students. Right now, we have a cohort of like 17 students who were scholarshiped this past summer, and they started taking community college courses. They're still in high school, but they took classes at the community college. The underlying motive is to get them started, help them understand that they can attend college if they want to, also to provide them with financial literacy and scholarship information so that they graduate without any debt, zero debt from college. Our education chair, Ms. Cowan, and the first vice president is on the call, Ms. Pamela Cowan. If you'll wave hello to everybody, Ms. Cowan, okay? And I'm going to turn it over to our parliamentarian and member of our political action committee, who also is an educator professionally, to Patrick Brown to introduce our guest. And I'm Karen Hardin, president of the Maricopa County branch NAACP. Thank you everybody for being here. Jot down your questions so we can have a Q&A after our speakers' talks. So Mr. Patrick.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hardin. There we go. I want to thank everybody for being here. Good morning. I'm Patrick Brown. I'm the parliamentarian with the NAACP Maricopa County branch, and I get the honor of introducing our guest speaker today, Beth Lewis. She's a mom, public education advocate, and K-12 policy expert who fights for fully and equitable funded schools for every Arizona child. As director of Save Our Schools Arizona, Beth works to bring parents, educators, elected officials, business leaders, and community members together in support of Arizona's public schools, which strengthen our communities and our great state. Beth has taught elementary school and middle school in Arizona for 12 years and has been named a Rodell Exemplary Teacher and Tempe Diablo Teacher of the Year finalist. She holds a BA from the University of Notre Dame and a master's in education from Arizona State University. So we're happy to have Beth here. She's going to talk about a really important issue regarding private school vouchers. A lot of people, believe it or not, don't know a lot about this issue, even though it's come up a lot over the years. If you guys have questions, like I said, there's no, it's like there's no big or small questions, just good questions. So please, as we're going through there, jot them, put them in the chat. Like I said, Beth is going to, of course, present, and then we're going to open this up kind of for a community discussion. We want your input, we want your thoughts, we want your participation. So with that said, Beth, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Patrick, and thank you all for being here. I have, yeah, I've been working on this issue for many years, so I have a lot of information, but I'm going to try and not repeat a lot of things that you already know, because I'm sure you're well versed in a lot of these issues. So I put together what I hope is a good, pretty seamless little presentation, and then glad to answer all the questions. So let me see, am I able to share my screen? Pat?
Yeah, you should be able to now.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, I mean, Patrick shared that I'm an educator, and I think, I'm also a parent, but I would say that, I come at this work of public education advocacy from, the point of view of being a teacher and fighting for my students more than anything. I definitely have seen firsthand the power of public education when done well, and when we have the resources we need to be successful for all of our students. And I've worked in the Fowler district, all the way on the west, in the West Valley, 75th Avenue and Lower Buckeye. I've worked in the Balts district. I've worked in Tempe Elementary School districts. I've seen, a lot of different communities, a lot of the disparities in resources, the inequities that are present across, not only across our communities, across the state, but also even within districts. And so I think that's really just what fuels my fight, to fight for more equitably distributed resources and to keep public funds in our public schools. So that's what Save Our Schools Arizona was formed to do. And we're also formed to fight against vouchers, which I'm going to talk to you about today, which essentially is, the privatization of our public school system as we know it. So we know that, just some baseline facts, we know over 90% of Arizona families choose public schools. Now, I say public here, I do mean publicly funded schools, so district and charter. The other 8-9% choose private school or like a homeschooling situation. We know that when children have a quality community school in their neighborhood that they can access with wraparound services, I think that, obviously those students do better, and there's more equity because you don't have transportation gaps, you don't have food gaps, you have services for parents, you have the ability for parents to be involved, which is one of the most important things. And we also just know that we're coming at this knowing that Arizona is still bottom in the nation, regardless of modest investments that have been made in terms of funding and resources. So this is from 2021. Unfortunately, most education data is backdated a year or two. It's not because anybody's hiding anything. It's a massive, beast. And so to accumulate that data just takes a little while. But even with this last investment that the legislature made, we're still not making up for the massive cuts that we've had over the last 2 decades. So this is from 2021. You can see we're still 50th in per student spending by the state. And so we're below West Virginia, Georgia, Alabama, Nevada, you name it, everybody. And what that does, and what we see in our communities, is that, this very low funding from the state means that local communities and local taxpayers have to kind of take on that burden. And what that looks like is that, in more affluent communities where property taxes are higher, where they're more likely to be able to run and pass things like bonds and overrides, or where they can get tax credits for their local public schools, or they have the, like superhero PTOs that raise all that money, those kids are a little better off. And those teachers are a little bit better off, and, they have a lot more resources. And then in communities where that's not as possible, the kids go without and the teachers go without. And so, we do have the most inequitable funding model in the entire US here in Arizona. There was a really interesting report in 2019 by the Ed Build Foundation that showed that non-white districts in Arizona, well, in America, received $23 billion less in education funding. And Arizona is the worst offender of all the states in terms of how inequitable our resources are. So I'm going to pull up the data. So we have our primarily white school districts receive $7,500 less than students in non-white districts, according to that report. And that was a few years ago, a couple years ago, but none of that has changed because the legislature hasn't done anything to redistribute funds. So, we talk about funding and people say, well, you can't throw money at a problem. And as a teacher, I really abhor that line because you really can solve these huge issues with funding. We have the most crowded class sizes in the US. It costs a lot to hire, 30% more teachers and build 30% more classrooms so that kids get what they need. We have the highest teacher turnover in the US. I need to update this number. It's now 1 to 700 counselor to student ratio. It's still one of the worst in the nation. And it impacts kids. We don't have as much arts. We don't have as much extracurriculars. When you look back to 20 years ago, what kids had versus now, it's less and less, and it's less every year, even with investments. And a lot of our schools are, broken down. They're older. They need to be rebuilt. Same with our buses, air conditioning, and sometimes we'll hear, well, why can't we have this? And, when district schools are fighting for scraps, sometimes you do have to replace the moldy carpet before you can, have an arts club after school. And so schools are stuck making really hard decisions all the time, and nobody's getting what they need. And a lot of this defunding, is part of what we kind of see as the privatization cycle. And this is demonstrated in Arizona as sort of the tip of the spear when it comes to school privatization, also Florida. And, I work with similar groups to ours all around the country, and they tell us, yeah, we just watch what's happening in Arizona and what's happening in Florida, and we know that that's coming to us, in a couple years. So, none of this is really hard to assess when you look at it from kind of the 10,000 foot view. But they've been defunding our public schools for years, decades, which forces underperformance, right, as we sort of documented. And then, folks come in and market private alternatives that look really great, at least at the outset. Our legislatures have then decided to grade our public schools on performance, mostly around standardized testing, which is really more about, the income of families and the socioeconomic status than it is about what the schools are doing. And then they perpetuate false narratives, right? We hear about failing government schools and kids stuck in failing systems, even though only 3% of our schools have an F, and we haven't submitted test scores in a couple years. They kind of orchestrate these false rhetorical things around, CRT and socio-emotional learning, and saying that teachers are groomers and, whatever the next thing is on Fox News that they're calling our teachers. And then, they come in and they try to expand private school vouchers on the premise that our schools are quote unquote failing. There's no other way to fix this. We can't possibly throw more money at the problem. We just need to privatize the system. And that's really what we've seen here in Arizona. And this is just sort of a cartoon that shows like brick by brick how they've been sort of going from, taking funds from public education and putting them in private schools. I've got a little graph to show you how the funding has increased over the years. But I think that's a little further. So just to kind of make it very clear, so vouchers cannot be used at charter schools because charters use public funding. So vouchers are for private school, which is only about 5% of our schools in Arizona, or for homeschooling, like home educating. And they have two different names in Arizona. So there's the ESA, which was named, in a very like euphemistic way, like an empowerment scholarship account. And that money is taken directly from the public school and given to the private school or the homeschooling situation. And then we've got STOs, which are sort of like voucher processing companies that run tax credit scholarships for private schools. And so you'll hear some of those terms kind of thrown about. So I wanted to just go into this a little bit, just the history of vouchers in general, because I think what we're seeing a lot of the same rhetoric around public schools that they saw in the 1950s. And, we're also seeing a lot of white flight, dog whistles, and, really scary things that I think will very much increase the segregation of our schools here in Arizona. So this is a quote from, sorry, my kids, from Milton Friedman. And, he came out in 1954 after Brown versus Board, and he said, the idea is we need to take government out of education. We need to offer vouchers so that, private schools can develop exclusively white schools, and this is well documented. This is in his essay, but he continues to kind of spread this information. You can see he presented at ALEC in 2006. And, we see like on Twitter, a lot of his ideas, he's sort of held up on this pedestal as, the father of vouchers by these folks who are paid a lot of money to push vouchers. But he was a vile, abhorrent racist, and he used the concepts of the free market to peddle vouchers in a way that's, very, very disturbing. And it's more disturbing that the rhetoric continues. So, post Brown versus Board, there were a lot of folks opened up things called segregation academies across the South in particular. The county in Griffin, the county school board in Prince Edward County in Virginia, the county had to be ordered to reopen its public schools. They were closed for, I think, 4 or 5 years. And the Supreme Court had to weigh in and say, you can't do that. And then, but even after that, de facto segregation continued. And even into the 70s, only 5% of the public school students were white. And, if we see, these segregation academies, they have long-term impacts. This is back in the 60s. In a single year, 41,000 students left Mississippi public schools, 21,000 students unenrolled from Alabama public schools, all across the South, numbers like that. It was just a mass exodus. And, the segregation is still incredibly pervasive in private schools across the South, even though, it's not legally permitted anymore. It's still very much, a thing. And we're seeing, I mentioned Florida, Texas, the South continues to be where vouchers are being pushed the hardest. And it's really, it's no coincidence, because, the racist roots of vouchers are there. And they're, we have folks that are alive that live through all of that, and unfortunately are still open to this concept because they live through it, and we still have obviously a lot of racism. So I don't know about this picture. It's pretty fuzzy, but I think it shows what I anticipate will happen in Arizona with universal vouchers, and what we're already kind of seeing, that segregation will definitely continue. And it's a piece of school choice that isn't it's not it's part of the design. I know that the NAACP has a resolution against vouchers. I know that the organization has come out and said that they support public schools and want strong integrated quality public schools, and know that school vouchers are a means of increasing academic gains, but that they really don't, right? That there's no clear research. So we can kind of go into that. And I only have one screen, so it's hard for me to share links, but I could go in and share some things, or have Patrick share them with you too. So I'm just kind of bringing this back to Arizona. So this is what we've seen. We have all of these special interest groups that come into the state legislature and say, oh no, this is just, we need $1 million for, just this very small target of, students with this particular special need. And that's all we're doing here. And then the next year they'll expand it and expand it and expand it, right? Until it's everybody. So here in orange, you see all the STO vouchers that go straight to private schools. And then in blue, you can see ESA vouchers. And so the expenditure that our state is making while we're defunding public schools is over $400 million to private schools every year already in Arizona. So I just think of all of the teachers that we could hire and everything that we could be providing. And, you know, the interesting thing is that private school enrollment has really been steady, about 5% in the last 20 years. This hasn't increased the private school enrollment. We're just now subsidizing it, if that makes sense. So, you know, in the last 20 years, we've grown this, the state has grown this to over $400 million without really increasing much in terms of private school enrollment. So just to talk through some of the issues, I mean, there are a whole host of issues. I could go on and on and on, but I will just sort of limit it to a few. You know, obviously with vouchers, there's a lot of inequity. Private schools, I mean, you can apply to get a voucher and the state, you know, if universal vouchers go through, the state can say, yeah, here's your $7,000, choose the private school that you wish. But private schools don't have to accept that voucher. They don't have to service your child's needs. If your student has special needs, they do not have to provide those services, unlike a public school, which is, you know, legally obligated to. Not that public schools do it perfectly, not saying that, but there's no requirement that they serve students' needs in a private school, and they can choose their students. Private schools obviously can turn away students for, you know, any reason, whether explicitly stated or not, because they're the ones choosing the students. So gender, religion, sexual orientation or identity, all sorts of different reasons. And they can also just say, no, we're not accepting students when they see a child. So, you know, some private schools won't discriminate and some will. And I don't really know how that's going to go down. And there's also no accountability with private schools. So that public funding will go directly to the private school, but in public schools, we've got locally democratically elected school boards that oversee funds. Parents can come and, you know, come to school board meetings and demand better programming or ask for more transparency. And public schools have to open up their books to the public. They have to report their test scores, right? The public knows where their taxpayer funds are going. But with private schools, none of that is true. And we don't know if a school is, you know, doing a really poor job for students or even if it's safe until, you know, well after probably we should know. In Arizona, you know, we've had 20 years of this quote unquote school choice. Obviously, in our current private schools, there's significantly fewer students of color. We have many more white and Asian students represented in schools of choice. And, you know, that's just fact. And I don't know that anybody is really doing what it takes to fix that fact. So like I already laid out, schools are choosing the child, right? And we really, I don't consider that school choice. Most of the current ESA funds are being used by affluent families in the suburbs. Definitely, you know, benefits students that are already leaving A and B rated schools much more. Very few families are taking advantage leaving D and F rated schools because it's just not set up for families, typically not in their neighborhood. There's no transportation, there's no, you know, wraparound services. Not even English language learner services in most private academies. So that leaves out, you know, a wide swath of our population. And then there are additional things. I mean, we've had cases of fraud and abuse, and they also are able to keep the funding. So you can take money out of a local public school, put it in your account, and then keep it and use it for college expenses, which is really horrifying to me, knowing that so many of our families are struggling and how those resources could be used for kids right now. And then lastly, we know there are many studies across the US the ones that are not funded by the think tanks that love vouchers, all show that there's no increase in student achievement, right? These students actually in many cases perform worse than their peers. And then when they go back to the public school, they're a year behind and the public schools got to catch them up. And we do, right? That's what we do in our public schools. It's okay, but it's not helping anybody. Here in Arizona, there is just so much money being poured into privatizing our schools. I cannot tell you. It's really depressing. I go down to the Capitol and, talk with lawmakers and try and convince them to support our public schools. And these lobbyists are crawling all over every day. And they spread a lot of lies. They tweak numbers. And at the end of the day, they work together to ensure that our public schools get less and privatized schools get more. And it's really a shame. We're seeing that shape up in the next big fight. Let's see if I'm right. Okay. So this is what happened this last session. And this is just kind of the end of my talk. But this is the big piece, so kind of what we can do about it. So the legislature on the last day of the legislative session, after trying to do this for the last 5 years, passed HB 2853, which is universal ESA voucher expansion. So this would give vouchers to every student in the state, regardless of income. And so, a multi-billionaire could take this funding. Arizona voters already voted no on this in 2018 by a hefty margin. It was 65% of voters voted no on this. And they just disregarded the will of the Arizona voters and just said, you know what, we know better than all of you. We're just going to pass it anyway. There was some academic accountability in the bill, a modicum, and that was stripped out on the last day as well. So now there's nothing. There's no financial accountability. There's no, academics. Nothing. And they keep saying, well, the parent gets to decide on accountability. And I mean, I'm a parent and I don't always know, what's going on. And I do trust my local school. But, not all parents are able to accurately assess whether their kid is safe and learning until sometimes it's too late. There's nothing in the bill that would stop, let's just say like a fly-by-night organization that's just for profit from opening up in a strip mall, handing out a Chromebook and plaid skirt saying, yeah, we're accredited with uncertified teachers. They don't even have to do background checks or anything according to this bill, and take the money, $7,000 per kid. If they close up shop in the middle of the year, public funds will never get that money back. Public schools will never get that funding back. And we can see Governor Ducey here, he has been touting this as saying, our kids will no longer be locked in underperforming schools, which is so frustrating. As somebody who's worked in our public schools and seen just the vile defunding of our schools and how hard our teachers are working. And then Betsy DeVos, of course, retweeted that right away because they're obviously working together. She funds American Federation for Children, which is already spending a lot of money in the state to pass it. But we are running a petition drive to stop this bill. And so we have to collect 118,000 valid signatures by September 23rd. So that is very soon. We're doing well. We could really use some more help. I will give you that information in the chat, but and I can show you. Let me just drop that for you.
So Patrick, do you? I'm sorry, Beth, but I think we've been bombed, right? We've been bombed. So that that message did not come from me. Somebody has infiltrated our
Oh
system.
my goodness, I just saw that. I'm like, I definitely don't think that was Carrie.
Mm-hmm. So go ahead. Yeah, that's cute.
I'm gonna put this in the chat.
You saw how I think you just saw the message.
Obviously, you're doing something right because the haters have rolled in. So we'll address it. Thank you, Beth.
Keep on, Beth. Just wanted to let you know
Okay.
that wasn't me. Mhm.
I've heard worse. I taught middle school, so
Okay.
I have thick skin.
It's just, it's incredible how they got it to come under my name, as though I did it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
we're running this petition drive. We're gathering signatures right now. Folks are out all over the state. Really great volunteer-led movement, and it's a lot of signatures. We have a very short amount of time, but we are working to protect public schools, to keep $1 billion in our schools each year instead of going out to unaccountable private schools, and stop this privatization of our schools. And this will just put the law on hold until the 2024 ballot, when voters can reject it once and for all. And this time there isn't a cap, and I think Arizona voters obviously don't support the bill. So, that's why we're getting so much opposition this time around, because they really don't want voters to have a say. So the last point I make is that Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA, he spreads very hateful ideology, and he is opening up. Actually, the same month that they passed this universal expansion, he announced that he's opening up Turning Point academies all across the state. And
they've gotten into me now. That absolutely is not from me.
Isn't it interesting how?
Isn't it
Folks, I'll monitor and everything. So so let's let Beth continue. We'll take care of the folks who want to disrupt.
I'm so sorry, Pamela.
Sorry, Beth, but keep on talking if we
Don't
can.
be sorry to me. I'm sorry that these people are so vile.
Yeah, but that just shows what extent they will go to.
So yeah, I mean, we have obvious concerns about Turning Point Academy. They have a statement of on their website that forces to attest that a man and a woman, and that there are only two genders, and that homosexual behavior is sinful, and that they, parents have to agree that that can be taught to their students. And so anyway, when we were talking about discrimination and kicking kids out for things like being who they are, I mean, I think that absolutely will be happening here in Arizona, and our taxpayer dollars will be going to fund that organization, which, has promoted Trump ideology, very extremist views. So it's pretty scary. So you can get involved. I would love it. I did put one of the links in the chat where you could grab petitions. I could also, I know, you can just reach out to me directly, and I can help facilitate that if you'd be interested in having a petition, or just learning more. And we can also mail them to you. There's a cute little bit.ly here. Oops. We have a college intern that's doing the mailing program, so I think it's great. So you can fill that out, and they'll send it right to you. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay.
We can see all of you.
Okay. So questions, Patrick, while you're monitoring, I will facilitate Q&A, okay? And I'll facilitate by first just saying thank you to everybody who has joined us today. Just ask, are there any questions? Anyone have any questions on how this affects? And being aware that, education, it's not, even though we're talking about education, it affects, it's all intertwined, right? Your educational achievement affects your employment affects your ability to earn a good income and your quality of life. So it's kind of all connected. And I was just wondering, for me, my first question, Beth, is can you explain a little bit more about the ESA, Empowerment Scholarship Accounts, and exactly how they work again?
Sure, yeah. So ESA is, it stands for Empowerment Scholarship Account. And so, what happened was they tried to pass vouchers in 2006. Arizona Supreme Court said, no, those are unconstitutional because you can't take public dollars and give them to, like a private religious school because of, our Blaine Amendment, separation of church and state. So they said, we're going to pass a workaround called an ESA, where we're just going to give that money directly to parents. And so the court said, okay, that's fine. So that's what it is. It can be used for home education purposes or for private school. And so it's kind of a flow chart that ESA goes into an account called Class Wallet. That funding can either be diverted directly over to the private school. Any private school doesn't have to be accredited or, no actual standards for that, just as long as it's an entity that provides education. Or it can be diverted over to home education. And then, there's more transparency there because families have to.
So if I want to homeschool my child, what do I do to get the $7,000?
So there's a portal online and you would just apply. There is a portal that's open right now. Currently, the students who are eligible are students with special needs, students on reservation land, students leaving DNF rated schools, foster youth, right? Because they've sort of expanded it over the years to different populations.
And then that money would come directly to my bank account.
No, it goes to your Class Wallet account. So, if you had, let's just say you had 5 children, you could apply for $35,000 from the state to go to your account. And then you could spend that, with approved expenditures. Typically that can be used for, curriculum, but it's really any curriculum of your choosing. I mean, it can be like creationist stuff. It can be, there's some like Bob Jones University kind of curriculum that people use. It's, they don't have to follow state standards. They definitely don't test. It's a little different than homeschooling. It's home education. Last year, there were bounce houses that were approved, snow cone makers, designer bar stools, I think, came up at the state board meeting and got approved. But typically, most of the expenses that home educators use are either used for their kids or they are then diverted to like their savings account, which they can later use for college.
Okay. All right. Jer has a question. Hi, Jer. Unmute yourself, Jer, and ask your question, please. Unmute yourself, Jer.
It's not a question.
Okay.
It's a comment. A lot of good information was presented here today. We need a lot of it is a review for some of us, but we need to hear it. I consider myself an expert on education. I taught for 50 years and at all levels, mainly university, and did a lot of educational research worldwide. Worked in other countries. And so I think a lot of what we heard today was good stuff. I will say that I don't think that it's our only problems are financial. We've got problems in the Arizona schools and other schools that are not financial based. Money would solve a lot of it, but we have problems of lack of autonomy, lack of respect. I've worked with graduates, master's students for 30 years. And what I hear from them is not complaints about money as much as about lack of respect, lack of autonomy, lack of input into the way the schools are run and the way the students and parents are allowed to treat them. And so I think that we need to solve the money problem, and that's a big one, but there are many, many other problems in addition to money that will have to be solved. The whole testing thing is a fiasco. I mean, it's a debacle. As long as we stay in the testing mode, we're going to have inferior schools. No other country does it like this, including the countries that we claim to want to emulate. Nobody does it this way. Nobody does all this testing. No one does the industrial model. And so maybe we should learn something by looking at how other countries do it, and not just because ours is pretty strong. And I have some other comments as we go along if there's time.
Okay, great.
Hey, Beth, I have a question. I know this comes up when I kind of go through my travels on this topic. Like we know that, in the application process and the amount that someone can receive for through the ESA or the school voucher. So say, for example, a school like Brophy. Brophy has what, $17,500 a year for tuition to send a child to Brophy. So if, say, a parent says, oh, hey, I'll use the Empower Scholarship to cover the tuition. So what happens when that parent they can't make up the difference? Can they apply for more money, or what happens if they, in that situation?
I mean, it varies a lot school by school, obviously. A situation like Brophy, it's very expensive. If they were to qualify for, let's just say, the $7,000 through this universal expansion, obviously that wouldn't cover nearly enough for most families. It's a good discount. I really like to think about the kids that are left behind, though. I mean, right now, there are 55,000 students that are currently enrolled in private schools, and there's no money allocated to those students. They've exited the public system, right? The funding in our public system is allocated per student. So any kid who's currently in a private school, there's no funding for them. But if they take $7,000 each, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that's going to exit our public system. And I really, really worry about all of the kids that are in our public schools right now and what that massive hit will look like. Back to your question, Patrick, I mean, I think that gap is worrisome. We're also getting a lot of, sort of direct emails that are being sent over that private schools, some of them are considering increasing tuition because that is possible. Because, if you're able to take $7,000 in from the state, you can ask other families to continue to pay your $15,000 a year. So we may see more sliding scale. I hope that we'll see, more support for low-income families. It's also really important to point out that the legislature could have written a bill that would have appropriated separate funding for these students instead of taking it out of public schools, but they didn't. And the legislature could have written a bill that would help low-income students in particular, but they didn't, and they refused. And we tried, but they would not do that.
Here's a question from, I think it's Simmons. How will stopping voucher expansion affect those who currently qualify?
So those who currently qualify will not be affected whatsoever by the referendum. We're just trying to stop the universal expansion. So everybody who currently receives a voucher will continue to receive vouchers, ESAs, in the exact same way that they already do.
Okay. And then the other question is, what can we do? What's your call to action? Like I said, I think what we see that education can, education affects every other aspects, like your quality of life, your, based on what your education is. Old statistic that I remember from a long time ago, that people with bachelor's degrees over their lifetime make $1 million more than folks who don't have bachelor's degrees. And then it's the same applies to like a high school diploma, how much folks with a high school diploma, how much they can earn. And it's not necessarily about how much money they earn, but a better quality of life that it affords them. If they can have a better job, if they're better educated, they can have a better job. So what's your recommendation, the organization's recommendation of resolution for what I'm understanding is like a drain of this money from the public schools?
Well, I definitely think that paying attention to who we're voting for this year matters the most. We have a huge opportunity to elect a governor who supports public schools and who supports, wraparound services for kids and really getting to the bottom of the child poverty crisis, right? Which, Jer, I think you kind of touched on. A lot of the pieces that you mentioned really have to do with the fact that Arizona's children are incredibly poor and not taken care of by the state. And, we statistically are just in a much worse off position. And a lot of that has to do with providing a better social safety net for kids. So, I believe if we do our research that, for example, just personally, Katie Hobbs will do a much better job for our children than Carrie Lake for governor. And I think that we need to research our local legislative districts. Our school boards matter so much. I can put the website for some of our endorsed candidates. We're still rounding out the list, but you could bookmark it and maybe check back, closer to the election. So that's one big call to action, is to vote for public education, vote for people who are going to prioritize our public schools and our children. And then obviously I would really encourage everybody to get a petition and ask friends and family to sign. It doesn't have to be full. There's 15 slots for people to sign, but even if you have 3 or 4 friends that would love to sign, you can do that, and that is an amazing contribution. Patrick, what am I missing? My brain's tired.
I think you kind of hit a lot of it. I think, the petition, of course, is an option. The NAACP, while we are a nonpartisan organization, we do encourage, folks to, be as educated on, the issues. And, like I said, the organization does have, issues that we are supportive of. And as you stated earlier in your presentation, the national organization does not support school vouchers. And of course the organization, it has always been pro public education and equity in education.
Okay.
I'd like to say that a lot of this was foreseeable. It was predictable. When I moved to Arizona in 1987, the state was about in the middle of most things, education funding, many things, kind of about in the middle, maybe just below the middle. And since then, we've gone down in almost every area. And over that 34 years that I've lived here, 35 now, we've gone down in almost every area. Plus, we've elected governors, and this governor, and I don't have to be political as Patrick does, apolitical, I'm just going to say it. He, as reported in the local media 8 years ago when he was first elected, he had about $6 million out of his $14 million was dark money. That's why people called him Dark Money Ducey. And there were signs out, dark money, dollar sign, Dark Money Ducey. Where'd that money come from? Well, we have two pretty good guesses. The private school industry, which is making buku money right here in Arizona, and private prison industry. And he's in the pockets of both. And so we need to get people who, you're right, Beth, we need to get people who are educationists, who are for education, and not just using it for their own political or financial purposes.
Okay, good. Okay, and then, like I said, let me reiterate that the NAACP is nonpartisan. Beth, the NAACP is nonpartisan. We do not endorse candidates, but the NAACP is interested in what's good for the majority of people, and the ideal that the more people, youth who are properly educated, the stronger society we're going to have. And there's a question from, is that Kayla? Do I pronounce that correctly? Kayla?
Yes, ma'am. That's Kayla. Hi. I am a member of the NAACP, and I
Which branch?
current
Which branch? There's a lot of different
the
branches.
Maricopa is where I signed up. I haven't
Say
been
it
able to
again?
attend any in-person meeting.
I'm sorry, which branch?
I am not sure of the specific branch. I signed up. It was all online. It was a
Okay.
couple years ago because I had been up in Spokane but hadn't been since I've been in Arizona. So it was actually during the pandemic that I was like, you know what, I'm gonna like update
So,
for Arizona.
it may be in Spokane or somewhere like that,
Yeah,
right?
probably
Okay.
still,
And if
yeah.
you don't pay your dues annually, you drop off. So, okay.
Yeah, I think
Your question,
it's one of the
please.
things I've got a motto. But yes,
Okay.
I am a current parent that uses the Empowerment Scholarship account. And I have been in low-income communities. I am not currently, but I grew up all 18 years of my minority with my mother is a single mom. She was medically disabled. So I lived on all state assistant programs. So I do understand living in that community. My question, because we talked about how this funding is tied to the student, that, you know, that's unfortunately right now, that's how we do our public education funding, is it's according to the students that are enrolled. When that student is coded as a publicly funded child, the three faucets, if you will, the three spigots of that money are coming from the state, the federal, and the local governments. And admittedly, not every district receives locality monies because of how property taxes are done. Differentiate is different in different places. But that money comes from, at minimum, the federal spigot for that student. If they take an empowerment scholarship account and they receive 90% of the state allocation, where is that federal allocation for them then going?
Okay.
Because
Beth,
it's my understanding.
We got your question. Beth, is that in your preview to answer that, or preview, or?
Yeah, I mean, the federal dollars are per pupil as well, but I'm really glad that you brought up the per pupil funding. We kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's really, I think, important to underscore that, you know, if this program were only for kids changing their schooling situation, I think it might be a little, you know, maybe a different conversation, because then that money would follow them, quote unquote. But right now, like I said, we have 85,000 students who are going to be eligible if this program goes through, and no state funding, no federal funding, no local funding has been allocated for those kids. All of that money, they've been in private school for many years. Their parents may make a ton of money, but all of that money will be stripped from local public schools. And so, you know, if the legislature had appropriated a separate fund and they said, hey, we just want every kid in homeschool and private school to get that money, they would have had to appropriate $600 million to a fund to say, hey, we're going to give coupons to people who've chosen private school and homeschool. And, you know, that's a different conversation. I don't know what the opposition to that would look like, but right now, I mean, the situation is that our kids just got an investment of about $500 million from the legislature, and all of that will be subtracted. And I think, you know, as somebody who works with students and really cares for students and sees what our teachers are doing in public schools, it is horrifying to me to think that we could take that giant leap backward for kids that aren't even changing their school system. I mean, it really is kind of a moral question. If you as a parent have chosen that, are you really willing to take $7,000 away from another kid? I don't know what the answer is going to be and whether a lot of people will recoup that funding, but it's pretty scary for people who know that there's 1 million kids being served in public schools.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, hold on. Okay.
Oh,
okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we're coming up on our time, and I want to say thank you to Beth before we run out of time. So thank you very much. And Jer has one more question, but what I want to ask you or tell folks about is please check our website, www. Maricopa, NAACP.org. We have a women's luncheon coming up September 10th. Our website is www.naacp.org. Maricopa, NAACP.org. And then this is just general information for everyone. There are over 2,300 NAACP branches across the country. So just saying I'm a NAACP member, be more clear on that. And also, if a person does not continue to pay their fee, the annual fee, you're like inactive members. Because we have people in our local branch, who are always saying, oh, I belong to the NAACP. But the different branches have different ways of operating. And it's real important to know and identify with your particular branch. And our membership chair is on the call right now. And she, just in our meeting before this, reminded us, our local branch, that some of the people in our local branch, they need to renew their memberships. Otherwise, they can't say that they're members. I can identify some people on the call, but make sure you check your membership card to be sure. It's really helpful if you guys keep your memberships current, okay? It helps us out a lot. And I'm gonna is Miss Simmons still on the line? She had a question in the chat, which I'm not sure I could decipher. There are definitely limits on choice that are system. No, that wasn't it. Where did one of our persons, I guess she just dropped off. I was going to ask her to ask her question so I wouldn't butcher it up. There was so Ms. Simmons, if you're still on, if you'll ask your question. If not, we'll defer to Jer, and that'll be our last comment or our question. And great presentation of information. Thank you, Beth, okay? Jer, one more question you have there?
Yes, thanks for calling on me, and thank you, Beth, again for the presentation. A lot of good information there. I just wanted to point out that, again, these things can get worse, and I don't want us to get blindsided like we did with the Roe and other things. Education is not guaranteed in the Constitution. It's not even mentioned in the Constitution, which means that it can be taken out. Another Supreme Court like this one, we shouldn't be too surprised if they just do away with it. The public education started in this country in Massachusetts in the 1640s, 15 years after they got off the boat. And it's been around for so long that we take it for granted, but it's not a legal basis, not really, not at the federal level. And so we need to be very careful and watchful in who we elect at offices all up and down the line, from president all the way down to local justice of the peace, because this is one right that could go away, and there are lots of people who would probably like to see that happen.
Okay, great. So Mr. Patrick, our parliamentarian and the member of our executive committee for the Maricopa County branch NAACP, check your membership status, your payment. No, okay. Would you like to close us out? That was just a joke. Let's make sure.
Hey, I know I paid. I got my receipts.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, just being clear. And Miss Pamela, I think you're a member. I think I've seen your membership. I think you're okay right now. But thank you everybody for being here. But Mr. Patrick, if you would like to close out our session, one more thank you to Beth for the information. We appreciate it, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Harden. Again, I want to thank everybody who was able to attend, take some time out to be a part of this discussion. I want to thank Beth for joining us and providing us this information. Because I'll be brief because it's Saturday and I'm sure people got places they want to go and things they want to do, and it's lunchtime. So I will say this is that it's one of my roles, of course, with the branch is part of the political action committee. So I have to, of course, make this plug. We have an election coming up, and elections matter. They matter from the bottom of the ballot to the top. Please make sure that you are registered to vote. If you are a registered regular voter, please just take a moment to double check and make sure your registration is active and there hasn't been any kind of snafus or anything like that as it pertains to your registration. Also, have these critical conversations with folks that your family members, your friends, people who may not be quite as engaged in what's going on in our state. Take a moment, have lunch, have coffee, talk to some people. Like I said, we get the government that we deserve and the government that we participate in. So with that being said, again, thank you.
Worker training, Patrick.
Oh yeah,
Poll
thank
worker
you.
training.
One other thing we are also doing is the branch is doing a poll worker training. This is for folks who will be on the ground handling, our elections. If you haven't been following in the news, we need more poll workers for the midterm election. Within Maricopa County, they were very understaffed, and of course, the more people who are working in this role, the more efficient that our elections can run. If you'll indulge me for a moment, I'll drop a link in the chat. We're like I said, we're partnering to do a poll worker training on September 1st at 5:30. It'll be at the South Mountain Community Center. And if you yourself are interested in participating, or someone who would be interested, please have them join up. And one other thing, poll working is a paid position. It's not just a volunteer role. So you become a county employee, in a contract sense, to be a poll worker. And I want to say the pay range is somewhere between $15 to $19, depending on what your specific role and skill set is and what you're hired for. So I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat. Again, if you missed any of the information that we have discussed, if I can multitask here. If you miss anything, that we do also have a newsletter that goes out weekly, and we try and get all that information in there as well. So here's the link, and thank you.
Okay, yeah. Thank you everyone for being with us today. And I just want to iterate what Patrick said about the poll worker. Please come to the training so you can get the information, even if your heavy schedule does not allow you to do that. Maybe getting the information and sharing it with others that because the importance of the poll workers is just making it a safe, fair environment for people to feel safe to come in and cast their ballot if they want to. And you get paid. Some people might like that little coffee money, it's you can earn a couple of dollars. So it's September 1. Have we put that on the website yet, Patrick? Do we have that information on our website? We'll get it up there.
That's a Tracy question.
There's a Tracy question. Okay. All right. But all right. Thank you very much, everyone. And have a good afternoon, safe afternoon, and help us keep democracy here in the United States. All right. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.